Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Your next session is just about to start. I think I mentioned it to everyone beforehand, but if you at all need live captioning or live translation this week, you should see a QR code on the screen just before you start the sessions. If not, we've always got it at the back of the room if you need it, okay? So your next session is going to be the secret ingredient of modern iOS app configuration. And without further ado, I want to introduce a couple of my colleagues. We've got Mark Buffington and Rob Potvin.
Thanks, man.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Glad you could join us.
Yeah, good afternoon. It's afternoon now. Wow. Yeah. So this is our session. I'm not going to read the title again. You heard it at the time, but and this is us. My name's Rob Potvin.
And what do you do here?
Oh yeah, senior consulting engineer at Jamf, based in EMEA. So I live just outside of Amsterdam. And
I'm Mark Buffington, also a consulting engineer, focused on Apple technologies, based out of Minneapolis. And this is now our third time at JNUC that we've been able to co-present. And so thanks for sharing it with us.
It's kind of become a JNUC tradition. So just to summarize, this is kind of our journey today, right? So the session's really looking at highlighting some of the challenges deploying iOS apps at scale. We want to look at the history of managed app configuration and, what is available as a Jamf technology and how to integrate, the app showcases and innovate solutions within kind of that whole experience. We're going to discuss some of the new innovations, right? Because it has evolved, right, from back in 2013 to what we have now. And spoiler alert, it will include DDM and blueprints.
Yep.
So we'll throw this QR code up now. It'll come again, but we do have a whole bunch of kind of links that we're going to be referring to or information that you can, follow along within the GitHub repo or save it for later. And then, hey, he was talking about this. Oh, there it is. So cool. Now, the question you're going to have right now is, do you have to be a developer to attend this session? The answer is
No.
No, you don't have to be a developer to attend a session. But you do, however, go ahead.
Well, you may know some app developers. You may have vendors that develop apps as well. And it's certainly a topic of intrigue that you may want to share and pass this on along with others. But importantly, all of this topic today involves work that a developer inherently has to do to enable that app.
Yeah. So when we start off kind of looking at where we're at, it is kind of a great divide, right? When we look at macOS device management and iOS device management, with macOS, you get everything, right? You get the scripts, you get, configuration profiles, you get, you name it, multitude of different types of certificates, the works. It has a 20-year head start on iOS. iOS was also designed a little bit differently, right? So iOS, iPadOS, a little bit less or kind of adaptive, right? We have kind of that managed app config or app config dependency. Very specific options are available. These constraints kind of just go not only just iOS and iPadOS, like we're going to talk about that a lot today, but this also affects visionOS and tvOS app management as well. So it's kind of that whole kind of tier of not macOS. So we take a closer look into the core problems. Purpose-built apps for what you need to deploy, right, are a tremendous benefit for your organization and your organizational workflows. However, right, the greatest app for your organization needs, it does present a number of challenges, right? And these challenges fall usually onto IT support, right? Either it's a pre-configuration that needs to be on the app to bypass some sort of, login or whatever else. But it usually ends up on a kind of like a frustrated end user who then contacts you, why is it not working so smoothly? And then, we all love support tickets. Next slide. Sorry about that. there was an animation that I clicked through. So if we look at the traditional managed app config, hands up for those who are familiar with what I'm talking about, app config. Who's ever deployed self-service on iOS? Okay, so if you deployed self-service on iOS, you use AppConfig, right? It's that blob of XML that you slap in on the iOS app deployment, right? And that configures self-service to communicate with Jamf Pro. So that's just an example, but that all started in 2013 with iOS 7. And it was pretty basic, right? It was more like a specific structure, a kind of like stored preferences for the device when it started for the first time to connect to whatever resources it needed to, okay? Or specific preferences, right? As it moved on, we then got a variable URL, right? And this variable URL basically says what it is. It gives the app the ability to get variables outside of its kind of like app container, right? So it would be able to, specific variables for, I don't know, let's say the Jamf Pro URL, which you can see that with when you're deploying self-service. Then we had dynamic updates, right? And with dynamic updates, that was kind of like unique app to manage integrations that could be pushed from Jamf Pro, right? And apps can also communicate back to the server to affect some real-time change. Now, this enabled kind of a little bit more robust app management. And let's just see some examples.
Yep, thanks, Rob. So already talked about the real-world example of self-service. I've got a handful of Jamf apps up here, really, at least looking at from the perspective of Jamf and IT administrators. There's a lot of things that come about where AppConfig can be the core of self-guided device management, things that don't involve IT, don't involve tickets, and the user can drive. So self-service is a great example. Jamf Return to Service as an app. Of course, you can always push the button from the web console, but if you've got a shift worker or someone who needs to reset, preserve their apps, Return to Service works great for that. Setup to reset, we've talked about at JNUX in the past, certainly sessions on pretty much all these apps. One app in particular, Jamf Mobile Assist, not everyone is familiar with. That actually went publicly available yesterday. It used to be a custom application business to business, but really offers some unique workflows where one device user can affect change on another device without having that user have any involvement with Jamf Pro, credentials, things like that as well. So really cool things that can be done with that. And some other technologies that are involved in that as well, which we have in some of our linked resources. But just a plug as well for some of our colleagues and teammates. We do have some hands-on experience for anyone who does work with some of these shared device workflows, specifically with iOS apps, the Lounge, Innovation in Your Hands. It's actually having a session right now, but it also has sessions the next 2 days as well. So if you're curious to check that out and find out more info. But a lot of the things that they highlight with those apps is kind of in parallel to other challenges you might have with AppConfig as well, because whether it's Jamf developing it or your in-house app development team, et cetera, there's always going to be some key challenges to the traditional AppConfig. Specifically, authentication challenges. Apple says outright, don't put secrets in AppConfig, don't put passwords there. Sometimes that can be a little bit of a compromise if it's one of these integrations where you want to give least privileges to API, client and secret, things like that. But it's still not perfect when it comes to that. And then certificate limitations. As a consulting engineer working with customers, I've had scenarios where people are wanting to build in-house apps, especially with some of the certificate-based workflows, things like hardware-bound keys, device attestation. These are technologies that app vendors also want to have access to secure their apps as well. And the unfortunate reality up until recently was that if MDM deployed a certificate to an iOS device, the app would have zero visibility to it, zero ability to use it for any purposes as well. Certainly different than on macOS when there's more freedom and simply just a checkbox to allow all apps access.
The great divide.
Indeed. So with some of those historical solutions and approaches, there have been some things that we at Jamf have done over the years that help highlight and kind of make some good compromises. And these are technologies we should certainly address here before we get to the main show as well. So
some of that historical solutions. One is like OAuth grant integration, right? And that was a device to pro authentication with management APIs, OAuth grant. Now, it was a secure authentication method, but again, just like Mark was talking before, recommended not to put that in a config. But if it's limited, very granular privileges, you need to do it because it was the only way to do it before, right?
Yeah, and just to plug in our resources, there's a great session from last year with the OAuth grant workflow, but that does allow an app to make device management changes to just that device record and not like my device couldn't affect your device, for example. Yeah. So pretty cool for what it is if you're in the device management world, but things get bigger.
Exactly. And even with that OAuth grant, right, it's an integration, but there is some limitations because you're offloading a lot of that logic back to the server rather than it just being in the app, right? So moving on though, a certificate SDK. Anyone here familiar with the Jamf Pro certificate, or the Jamf certificate SDK? Anyone heard about it? Anyone puts their hand up, they probably work for a bank or something. No, it's okay. But yeah, we do have the certificate SDK. I've worked with a multitude of different organizations that want to develop a specific in-house app, but there requires a specific, for this app to work, they require a certificate, right? And so this, basically the certificate SDK is that app configuration data to make sure that app can get a certificate from Jamf Pro for the user using the device, right? Recently we did some updates to have multiple SAN requests, so just kind of do some changes with Microsoft, but again, it's limited to another integration on top of that, and that's the Jamf ADCS certificate, the Jamf ADCS connector, so between Jamf Pro ADCS and then the certificate SDK. So that's a lot of information. No one's sleeping yet though, so that's good. Okay, so these are really good solutions, but they have very specific use cases.
So introducing Apple's Managed App Framework, and even just starting with a wonderful WWDC session here, we're not going to rehash everything in that. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. It's got information from the development perspective of things as well.
And if you have any in-house development, make sure they watch.
Yes. And this was introduced originally with iOS 18.4 and tvOS 2.4. So support goes back a little bit earlier than this year's OS versions, but it's built within the existing app managed declarative configuration type. That config type was introduced with iOS 17.2. And it was introduced as an alternative method to install applications from your server, but using declarations, setting some of the app attributes and other functions like that, as far as whether it can be removed or not, et cetera. But the big difference is that with Managed App Framework in the new OS, it now has its own app config array of data options that were introduced for the new OS versions. And specifically, an app doesn't need to do any sort of like hard cutoff to go from old app config to new app config. You can have the app leverage both the legacy app config and the new managed app capabilities. And to be honest, as we go through a time of transition, as we'll go through a little bit ahead, you may want to approach it that way, both from a development perspective, as well as the tools that you have with Jamf Pro to deploy it. So some of the highlights, some of the big new things here are secure secret delivery. Since we are using declarative device management, anything that's deployed via DDM, if you've ever tried to find what's installed on my Mac with DDM, there is no trace that you can really see. It's in a protected space. You can't inspect it, interrogate what's on there. Like, if you send something that is a declaration, a declarative asset that's like a credential or something like that, that is going to be securely stowed away on the device with DDM, as well as other things like certificates. Speaking of certificates, they get to be accessed. You can link through a configuration to say what certificate asset you allow a specific app to use. And even better yet, if your app is using and wanting to use hardware-based assurances from Apple's declaration servers, you could deploy an Acme certificate as long as the CA supports the Acme DA spec, DA being device attestation, where it can read an attestation from Apple to verify the device's integrity and attributes. So pretty cool things broadly. In that framework, similar content here laid out just a little bit differently, but the specific objects, there's different asset types of passwords, certs, other identities, and then yeah, I think I pretty much summarized that in the previous slide here as well.
And the cool thing, it's all Apple native, so there's no need for like a certificate SDK from a vendor. There's no need for, like the Jamf ADCS. This can be delivered with the DDM spec directly to the device.
Exactly.
So.
And when you are deploying both an asset and a related configuration with declarative device management, different than configuration profiles, these objects are separate from each other. They can be referenced, like the certificate can be referenced by the config, but if you have to update something, you don't have to update both. There's no interruption of updating, say, renewing a certificate and things like that. So as we look ahead at the managed app framework that you as IT may be tasked with deploying and configuring, there's kind of 4 main data types that are part of the managed app framework that will work with some of the other capabilities of the declaration. So you've got the app configuration, passwords, certificates, or those identities, and each one of those has their own declarative object. And like we were saying before, there's going to be kind of at least for today, a specific type of approach that you may want to take, both for how your app reads from legacy AppConfig, as well as how it reads from the newer app managed framework. The biggest one being variables. Today, in Jamf Pro, you can deploy apps with AppConfig, get the rich support of variables, whether it's hardware or Jamf Pro identifiers, custom extension attributes as variables, you name it. It's very extensible as far as what can be put unique to a device, a user, an app, etc. And for those variable supports, as that's not yet in blueprints, you would want to deploy certain key values through the legacy managed app config from that. And then the app would also want to read from the new declarative framework that holds those new managed secrets and links those together. And there we have the animation. Awesome. So what does it look like? As we've seen today, already through the keynote, Blueprints is kind of the core at this. What we're showing here today is something that you might have seen glancing through some of our earlier keynotes. It was on the screen, a little bit subtle, but there's a new object that's coming called a custom declaration object.
Hands up for who saw it in the keynote. Did you see it on screen? Custom configuration?
Nice, good eye.
Nice.
I was hoping people would see it.
Yeah.
It is something that it's coming in public beta very soon. If you want to poke around with it at the Jamf booth, can take a look at it there. But within the custom configuration object, we do have the capability of managing both assets and configurations and grouping them together, adding multiple of them where one references the other, and you get that declarative goodness of of how they can link and be technically separate objects, but one logical thing that you're deploying out. So if you saw on that screen, that's kind of a lot of JSON that you might need to paste in there. That begs the question and the challenge, where are you going to find that JSON? Apple's GitHub documentation, of course, is the
standard, which starts from.
Yeah, I mean, the source of truth for everything stems from there. It's great if you're looking at, firstly, reading about capabilities, what keys you may want to include, etc. But it's not necessarily going to build the JSON for you. But certainly useful. Say if you had an example, maybe you needed to deploy a credential to an application, an API key. I think here we're looking at, in the video, was glancing at the credential type of asset as well as the app managed framework. But to put those together, there are some easier ways. So I wanted to call out and highlight the DDM Explorer app, which was introduced last year at JNUC. A great way to browse a lot of the configurations from Apple for declarative management. But with that app, it's going to download that data and show it so you can build and play with some of these configurations on your own.
Syncs all that Apple GitHub repo data, brings it down, and lets you show it, right? And play with it.
Yep.
Rather than clicking through GitHub. So.
And then get that into, that guy knows something about it back there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's something, it's a cool app. It's a nice way to build some of these. And I'll show just a quick little demo of that. Because personally, I don't really build JSON. I like tools to do things like that for me. So in this video, we're going to take a look in the app. We've got assets up here, and I can look at different asset types, such as the credential, or look at the configuration types as well. And a lot of that documentation is also built in here as well, just to see what platform it applies, what minimum OS. But as you build something out, you'll kind of want to work left to right and look at these different objects that are here. So here I'm defining an app and the bundle ID of my app, and I hit the add button, and that adds it in there and activates it. For other objects, there's a number of different things that are simply about how you install applications, and maybe you installed it already using a regular app record within Jamf Pro. So I'm going to scroll down here and find my way to the AppConfig array that was introduced in the latest OS version. So slow scrolling, pardon if you can't read this, but if you see, that's a dictionary. You're not going to add anything, so you do need to still hit the add key to sort of add that dictionary, and as things sort of tab out, you can see the different options that you want to use are going to be there as well. So
you see why a tool like this is nice compared to writing this JSON out yourself?
Yeah. So as you move left to right, you add that array. You're looking at a password app config item, and that's also going to be another dictionary. But soon here, we're going to be in the spot where basically the declaration configuration wants to reference an asset. So here, we will give the credential a title as an identifier. That title is for the app itself to call it up. So if the app is like, well, what is my user, my credential? The DDM system can then pull it up for them that way. And then in this part for the asset reference, you'll see, or if you can see there, I'm using a variable. And this is something that's part of the new blueprint configuration for custom payloads. So it's $payload _1 or 2 or whatever you may have listed in your custom declaration. So as I've added all of those things, I'm going to hit the edit button. And all the JSON that's there is what I'm going to copy and paste into Jamf Pro. As it's set there, you can also do some additional validations, see if there was anything missed. Jamf Jamf Pro itself in the blueprints editor also has JSON validation, so it won't let you send something that's not valid as well. So once I've got that, we can look at the blueprint itself. So I'll start with an asset, and you can choose what channel, user or system channel. When it comes to iOS, it's going to be system channel, unless you're deploying to shared iPad. It could be user channel as well. Enter the asset type, and we do some validation just to see, is this a known asset type? And this particular one is simply a credential, my super secret password and my username that's in there. And then once we have that built, then we can add another item, and that other item can be the configuration that then references it. So what we gathered from the DDM Explorer app, again, you put the configuration type, paste it in, you can reformat it, another sort of validation type of thing visually as well to make that set. So this ultimately is what it can look like today. That's not to say that's what it's going to look like in the near future. When it comes to the managed app declaration type within blueprints, there's a lot of options, and there's other dependencies on getting the apps on the devices itself. So in many ways, that's why we see this kind of as the, hey, if you really want to get your app deployed with this framework, we want you to get started right away. We want you to be able to test with this. We want you to be able to work with engineering that are building these apps. Yep. And I would expect these to be enhanced and added as more of a native thing within the blueprint builder and editor.
We need, you need to deploy the apps, get the developers on board to support some of these new features, and on top of that, just feedback, right? What is the best way to deploy? What is the best way for the UI? When are some of the variables coming in, and those kind of things, right? So.
Yep. So expect more to come from blueprints, especially for app deployment. But we want people to get started today.
Yep.
And Rob, I'll let you take us home.
It just says Rob. No. So some of the managed app takeaways. It's moving to DDM, right? As you can see, DDM is, we can't say it's the future now. DDM is now. Looking at the old way and versus the new way, the proof is in the pudding, so to say. It's just more secure, right? There's less barriers, right? Device attestation, like all in all, a lot more secure and a lot more flexible with getting those credentials and/or certificates. And blueprints, currently you can deploy, right, with the custom configuration. Have a look at some of the resources to make that better. There's any, and speaking of resources, here it is again. So for all the things that we referenced within this talk, all the links there, we did put it up at the beginning, but now we're going to put it at the end. We'll leave it on screen now too. We got some time still.
Yeah, we have time for Q&A, but thank you. I hope this was helpful either for you all here or your engineering friends and partners that you want to build cool things together with to deploy in your orgs.
Or it could be I'm in the wrong room.
Amazing. Thank you, Mark and Rob. Can we put our hands together for Mark and Rob for that, please? Thanks.
Thank you.
So as we've just said, we've got a little bit of time left for some Q&A. So does anybody have any questions? And I can run the mic out, and hopefully that's okay with Mark and Rob. Any questions?
Okay, so iOS app deployments have been a pain point for my organization. We used to use Jamf setup and reset, and then ran into issues with it. I guess I'm just kind of wondering, do you know if there's going to be kind of with this new DDM approach and blueprints. Is there going to be like a rework of that app? Will any of this filter its way in there? Because currently our iOS setup is outside of Jamf, and I would love to bring it all back into Jamf.
Sure. So I can't predict our future roadmap, but the way I would phrase it would be if there's a need or an opportunity for our Jamf first-party native apps to leverage like secrets, different identities and certificates to set up, I would say that's absolutely of interest for us.
Yep.
Really it depends on the situation. Most of the time in Jamf setup and reset, there's traditional ways there's not secrets. There's just the role-based picker that IT admin sets up the different roles, or if you're using single login, that's using some different SSO extensions and Microsoft Authenticator and more of like a Microsoft Entra focused, and also working with compatible apps for shared use. But again, that's more of that's more
Very
of like
particular on the workflow that you're talking about too, because we don't really know your workflow. So
Yeah.
you can hit us up maybe after too, and kind of let us know what you're thinking or what you're trying to do, and we can feedback.
Yeah, that or the folks at our industry booth,
Yeah,
or the folks
exactly.
that are at those lounge sessions are
Did you see the lounge session slide coming up? Yeah.
tomorrow and the next day before lunch.
That's also, I would highly recommend, because that be like, this is the problem I'm having, get some feedback and or some.
Any other questions?
Do we want him to ask a question? No.
I'll behave myself. Regarding the DDM Explorer app, my organization was led into a trial of it last JNUC at like a brain date session.
Yeah.
Is that the current version that's available, or is there an update to the sort of beta? How do we hands on that?
I believe it is the same shipping app that's delivered through the App Store as an unlisted app, and the link is at concepts.jamf.com.
Okay. So I didn't recognize some of those things that you were clicking on in the version I have, but maybe it's out of date.
So concept.jamf.com, click it, you'll be taken to the App Store for probably the new version then.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, like you said, the guy's scenario might be really specific using reset, but maybe return to service could step in some of the stuff that Jamf Reset was doing.
Yeah.
Yep.
We use that at our org pretty successfully.
Yep.
On the app preservation, especially in return to service workflows with iOS 26, is awesome.
Yeah.
To be able to do that.
Hands up for anyone who actually played with that yet? Return to service with app preservation? Yeah. So think of wiping a device and it's up with all the apps on it under a minute. Like, it's crazy. Well, maybe a minute.
It's more than
maybe
a minute.
Maybe a minute.
But you're not doing any
Anything, yes.
network resources to download things. It's still a device wipe, but those apps all get sort of stashed and cached there and are right back where they were without any user data when you start up again.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Awesome. Thanks again.
So thank you, and you get 10 minutes.